The distant howl of a wolf pierced the veil of darkness as Lydia Daniels pressed her back against the weathered barn wall, one hand clutching her bleeding shoulder, the other wrapped around the handle of her father's revolver. The bounty hunters were too close, and she was running out of both time and options. She'd been running for 3 weeks now, ever since that fateful night in Santa Fe when everything had changed. La Junta, Colorado Territory, 1873, had seemed like the perfect place to disappear. Small enough to hide in, big enough that strangers didn't draw immediate attention. But someone had recognized her. Someone had talked. The crunch of boots on gravel sent her heart racing. Lydia adjusted her grip on the gun, her palms slick with sweat and blood. She wasn't going back. She'd die before she let them take her. "You in there, girl?" a gruff voice called out. "We know you're hiding. Might as well come on out and make this easy on yourself." Lydia swallowed hard. 3 men against 1 wounded woman. The odds weren't in her favor, but she'd faced worse. She'd survived worse. "I count to 3, then we're coming in," the man shouted. 1, Lydia closed her eyes, steadying her breathing. 2, she cocked the hammer of her revolver. The sudden sound of gunfire cut the countdown short. Not her gun she hadn't fired, but shots rang out nonetheless. Shouts of surprise followed, then more gunfire. Lydia crouched lower, wincing as pain radiated from her shoulder. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of a single pair of boot steps approaching the barn door. Lydia raised her gun, aiming at the entrance, prepared to shoot the moment it opened. The barn door creaked, sending a shaft of moonlight spilling across the dirt floor. A tall silhouette appeared in the doorway. "Anyone in here?" The voice was deep but gentle, nothing like the bounty hunters. Lydia remained silent, her finger tensed on the trigger. The man stepped further in, a lantern in his left hand illuminating his features' tanned face weathered by sun and wind, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes that looked both wary and kind beneath the brim of his Stetson. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, raising his empty right hand. "Those men won't be bothering you anymore." "Who are you?" Lydia demanded, her voice hoarse from thirst and fear. "Name's Matthew Xavier," he answered. "Most folks just call me Matt." "What do you want, right now?" "To help whoever they were hunting." His eyes found her in the shadows. "That'd be you, I reckon." Lydia tightened her grip on the revolver. "How do I know you're not just planning to claim the bounty yourself?" Matthew set his lantern down and removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with hints of chestnut. "Madam, if I wanted that bounty, I wouldn't have put 3 bullets in the man carrying the wanted poster." Lydia hesitated, studying him. He didn't look like a bounty hunter, but appearances could be deceiving. "Turn around and leave. I don't need your help." "With respect, madam, you're bleeding, and there might be more coming." "There are always more coming," she said bitterly. Matthew took a cautious step forward. "I've got a place, safe place few miles from here. You'd be welcome to rest up, tend to that wound." "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know those weren't lawmen out there. Lawmen identify themselves. Those were hired guns." Lydia wavered, pain and exhaustion clouding her judgment. The revolver felt impossibly heavy in her hand. "I can't trust you," she said, even as her vision began to blur. Matthew nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Fair enough, but right now trust might be the only thing keeping you alive." The barn spun around her as the blood loss took its toll. Lydia stumbled, catching herself against a wooden post. The gun slipped from her fingers. "Easy now," Matthew said, rushing forward to catch her before she hit the ground. "I've got you." As consciousness slipped away, Lydia whispered, "They said I'm dangerous." The cowboy held her carefully, his reply the last thing she heard before darkness claimed her. "Then you're safe with me." When Lydia next opened her eyes, she was lying on a soft bed in an unfamiliar room. Sunlight streamed through a window, illuminating simple but comfortable furnishings: a wooden chair, a small table, a dresser with a washing basin. Her shoulder had been bandaged, her dirty clothes replaced with a clean shirt that was far too large for her frame. She tried to sit up, grimacing as pain lanced through her injured shoulder. The door opened, and Matthew entered carrying a tray. "Ah, you're awake. Good. Was starting to worry." "Where am I?" Lydia asked, her voice raspy. "My homestead," he answered, setting the tray down on the bedside table. "About 5 miles outside of La Junta. Been here 3 days." 3 days? Lydia's eyes widened. "I've been unconscious for 3 days. Fever, Matthew explained, pouring water from a pitcher into a cup. The bullet grazed you, but the wound got infected. Doc Jensen came out, cleaned it proper, said you'd be all right with rest. Lydia accepted the cup with her good hand, eyeing Matthew warily. You brought a doctor, he'll talk. Doc Jensen's been patching up folks with questions best not asked since before the war, Matthew said. He won't talk. Lydia drank deeply, the cool water soothing her parched throat. Those men in town. Buried and forgotten, Matthew said, his tone matter of fact. Sheriff ruled it self-defense after I explained they drew on me first, which they did, and the wanted poster burned it. He sat down in the chair beside the bed. Figured whatever it said wasn't the whole truth anyway. Lydia studied him, confusion evident in her expression. Why are you helping me? Matthew was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as if looking at something far beyond the walls of the room. Finally, he spoke. 6 years ago, I was riding with a group of men. We weren't on the right side of the law, got involved in something I shouldn't have. Someone helped me when they had no reason to, gave me a second chance. He gestured around the room. This place, this life, it's my second chance. Figured maybe you could use one too. You don't know what I've done, Lydia said quietly. No, I don't, he agreed. And I'm not asking, but I know those men were killers, not lawmen. That tells me something. Lydia looked down at her hands, one calloused from work, the other still bearing the faint stain of dried blood despite someone having cleaned her up. I killed a man, she said after a long silence. A powerful man, he deserved it, but his family doesn't see it that way. Matthew nodded, no judgment in his eyes. Eat something, he said, indicating the tray that held a bowl of stew and a chunk of bread. Get your strength back, we can talk more when you're ready. He stood to leave, but Lydia's voice stopped him. Matthew, he turned back, thank you. A small smile touched his lips. You're welcome, miss. She hesitated only briefly. Lydia Daniels. Rest well, Miss Daniels. The next few days passed in a haze of sleep and recovery. Matthew kept his distance, respecting her privacy but ensuring she had everything she needed. He brought her meals, fresh water, and once, a book, a worn copy of The Last of the Mohicans that he said had been a favorite of his late mother's. By the 5th day, Lydia was strong enough to venture out of the bedroom. She found Matthew in the main room of the cabin, mending a bridle at the table. He looked up when she entered, surprise and pleasure crossing his features. You're up, he said, setting aside his work. I'm tired of that room, Lydia replied. She was wearing one of his shirts, the sleeves rolled up multiple times, and a pair of trousers he'd found that almost fit her with the help of a belt cinched tight. Understandable. He gestured to a chair. Care to join me? Lydia nodded, sitting down carefully to avoid aggravating her shoulder. She looked around the cabin, taking in the details she'd missed during her brief moments of consciousness upon arrival. It was larger than it appeared from the outside, with the main room serving as both kitchen and living area. A stone fireplace dominated one wall and shelves lined another, filled with books, far more books than she'd expect to find in a cowboy's home. You read a lot, she observed. Matthew followed her gaze to the shelves and shrugged. Winter nights get long out here, books help pass the time. Where did you get them all? Here and there. Traders, mostly, some were my father's. He picked up a cup and took a sip of what looked like coffee. Would you like some, please? As Matthew poured her a cup, Lydia continued her survey of the cabin. It was tidy and well-maintained, if simple. A man's home, but not a crude one. Through an open door, she caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a workshop of some kind. What do you do? She asked. For work, I mean. Bit of everything, Matthew answered, sliding the cup across to her. Raise some cattle. Break horses for folks who can't manage it themselves. Do some carpentry work when I can get it. He nodded toward the workshop. Been working on furniture lately, seems to sell well in town. Lydia took a sip of the coffee, finding it strong but good. You live out here alone. Just me and the livestock, he confirmed. Had a ranch hand for a while, but he moved on last spring. Got hitched and headed to California. Silence fell between them, comfortable but laden with unasked questions. I should leave soon, Lydia finally said. I've imposed long enough. Matthew studied her over the rim of his cup. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, no imposition. That's kind, but I can't stay, it's not safe for you. Because you're dangerous, he asked, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Lydia flushed, remembering her half-conscious confession. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Lydia's fingers tightened around her cup. The story was one she'd never told in full, not to anyone. But something about Matthew's steady presence and the safety of his home loosened the knot of secrets in her chest. I was a governess, she began. For the Harrington family in Santa Fe, Mr. Harrington was a banker, very wealthy, very respected. I was hired to teach his 2 daughters. She paused, memories flooding back. The girls were wonderful, sweet, bright, but their father. Matthew waited patient as she gathered her thoughts. He started, visiting my room at night, Lydia continued, her voice dropping. Said if I told anyone, he'd have me arrested for theft. Who would believe a governess over him? And I needed the job. My father died last year, left nothing but debts. Matthew's expression darkened, but he remained silent. One night he came to my room drunk, angrier than usual. Lydia swallowed hard. He wasn't satisfied with what he'd been taking. He wanted more. He had a knife. Her fingers absently traced the faint scar along her collarbone, visible above the loose collar of the borrowed shirt. We struggled. The knife, I managed to turn it back on him. Her eyes met Matthew's, defiant and haunted. I didn't mean to kill him, but I'm not sorry he's dead. You shouldn't be, Matthew said quietly. His brother didn't see it that way, Lydia continued. He's a judge. Declared me a murderer without a trial, put a bounty on my head. Said I'd seduced his brother, then killed him in cold blood when he wouldn't marry me. A bitter laugh escaped her. As if I wanted anything from that monster except to be left alone. And you've been running ever since, Lydia nodded. 3 weeks. Thought I'd lost them in Pueblo, but… She shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at her healing wound. Matthew was quiet for a long moment, absorbing her story. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. You're not a murderer, Lydia. You defended yourself against a man who would have killed you. The law doesn't see it that way. The law isn't always just… Lydia looked at him, really looked at him for the first time without the filter of suspicion or fear. His eyes were a deep blue, honest and direct. There was strength in the set of his jaw, but kindness too in the slight curve of his mouth. He was handsome, she realized with a start, the kind of handsome that wasn't about perfect features, but about character etched into every line of his face. Why did you help me? She asked again, needing to understand. Matthew considered the question. I told you about my past, that I was riding with men on the wrong side of the law, Lydia nodded. What I didn't tell you is why I left that life. He rolled up his left sleeve, revealing a jagged scar that ran from wrist to elbow. The man who led our group, he wasn't just a thief. He enjoyed hurting people. I didn't know that when I joined up, was young, stupid, just looking for adventure after the war. He traced the scar with his fingertips. We robbed a stagecoach. There was a woman inside, traveling alone. The others wanted to. Well, you can imagine, I tried to stop them. He smiled grimly. Got this for my trouble, left for dead on the trail. How did you survive? Apache hunting party found me. Their medicine man saved my life, though they had no reason to help a white man. Taught me something about judging people by their actions, not by what others say about them. He looked up at her. When I saw those men hunting you, saw the fear in your eyes when I found you. I guess I remembered what it felt like to be hunted. Lydia felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble. I've been alone so long, she whispered. Running, always running. Matthew reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers, offering but not demanding. Maybe it's time to stop running. Slowly, hesitantly, Lydia placed her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong against her skin. For the first time in weeks, she felt the tendrils of hope uncurling in her chest. Maybe, she agreed softly. The days that followed established a tentative rhythm. As Lydia's strength returned, she insisted on contributing to the household. Matthew showed her around the homestead, a modest spread with a small herd of cattle, a vegetable garden, a workshop where he crafted furniture, and a stable housing 3 horses. This one's Sovereign, Matthew said, introducing her to a magnificent black stallion. Bit of a handful but loyal to a fault. The mare is Penny, gentle as they come. And this old fellow, he patted the neck of a dappled gray horse, is Colonel, been with me since the war. Lydia approached Penny cautiously, offering her palm. The mare sniffed it, then nudged her hand affectionately. She's beautiful. She's yours while you're here, Matthew said. If you'd like to ride, that is. Lydia smiled, the expression still feeling foreign on her face after so many weeks of fear. I'd like that very much. They fell into a partnership of sorts. Matthew tended the cattle and worked in his workshop, while Lydia took over the garden and helped with preparing meals. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes reading companionably. Lydia found herself watching Matthew when he wasn't looking the way his brow furrowed in concentration as he worked, the gentle way he handled the animals, the rare but transformative smile that would light his face when something amused him. 2 weeks after her arrival, Matthew announced he needed to go into town for supplies. "I'll come with you," Lydia said immediately, fear flaring. The thought of being left alone, vulnerable, was suddenly unbearable. Matthew studied her face. "Are you sure that's wise, if someone recognizes you?" "I can't hide forever," she said, though her heart raced at the prospect. "And I don't want to be alone," understanding dawned in his eyes. "All right, we'll go together, but we'll need to be careful." They rode into La Junta the next morning, Lydia wearing one of Matthew's hats pulled low over her eyes, her hair tucked beneath it. The town was small but busy, with a main street lined with the usual establishments: general store, saloon, hotel, livery, and the sheriff's office. "Stay close," Matthew murmured as they hitched their horses outside the general store. Inside, the proprietor greeted Matthew warmly. "Matt Xavier, been wondering when you'd show your face again. Almost out of those chairs you brought in last month, folks can't get enough of them." "Glad to hear it, Mr. Peterson," Matthew replied. "I've brought a list of supplies we need." Mr. Peterson's curious gaze shifted to Lydia, who kept her head slightly downturned. "And who might this be?" "My cousin," Matthew said smoothly. "Lydia. Staying with me for a spell while she recovers from an illness." "Pleasure to meet you, miss," the shopkeeper said. "Any family of Matt's is welcome in La Junta." Lydia nodded politely but said nothing, afraid her voice might somehow give her away. As Mr. Peterson gathered their supplies, the bell over the door jingled, announcing new customers. Matthew tensed almost imperceptibly beside her. Lydia risked a glance and saw 2 men enter, one tall and lean with a deputy's badge pinned to his vest, the other shorter, well-dressed in a suit that spoke of Eastern money. "Deputy Miller," Matthew acknowledged with a nod. "Mr. Reynolds." "Xavier," the deputy returned coolly. His gaze flickered to Lydia, lingered for an uncomfortable moment, then moved on. The well-dressed man, Reynolds, was less subtle in his scrutiny. "Don't believe I've had the pleasure of meeting your companion, Xavier." Matthew's hand came to rest lightly on the small of Lydia's back, a protective gesture that wasn't lost on either of the newcomers. "My cousin just visiting. Lydia, this is George Reynolds, owns the bank here in town." "A pleasure," Reynolds said, extending his hand. Lydia had no choice but to take it, murmuring a greeting as she did so. Reynolds held her hand a moment too long, his gaze calculating. "Forgive me," he said, "but you seem familiar. Have we met before?" Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't believe so, sir. Perhaps in Denver." "Or Santa Fe. I travel often for business." "Lydia's from back east," Matthew interjected. "Boston, first time west of the Mississippi." Reynolds released her hand but continued to study her face. "Is that so? You don't have the accent." "Our family moved to Boston from Virginia when Lydia was young," Matthew explained, the lie flowing easily. "Mr. Peterson, is our order ready? We should be getting back before the weather turns." The shopkeeper nodded, gathering the last of their supplies into a crate. "All set, Matt." "Put it on your account, please." As Matthew lifted the crate, Deputy Miller stepped closer. "Heard there was some trouble out near your place a few weeks back, Xavier. 3 men shot dead." "They were looking to cause harm," Matthew replied evenly. "I defended myself." "Always seems to be trouble around you," Miller remarked. "Makes a lawman wonder." "If you've got questions about my actions, deputy, take them up with the sheriff. He ruled it self-defense." "Sheriff's not as suspicious a man as I am," Miller said. "Especially when it comes to former Confederate soldiers who rode with Quantrill's raiders." Lydia felt Matthew stiffen beside her. His voice, when he spoke, was dangerously soft. "I never rode with Quantrill, I've told you that before," Miller smirked. "That's right. You were just nearby all those times. Convenient." "We'll be going now," Matthew said, his jaw tight. "Good day, gentlemen." Outside, Lydia could see the tension in every line of Matthew's body as he secured the supplies to Sovereign's saddle. "What was that about?" she asked quietly. Matthew glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. Miller's had it in for me since I settled here. His brother died at Lawrence the massacre during the war. He thinks anyone who wore gray was part of it. Were you part of it, I mean? Pain flashed across Matthew's features. No. I was a scout for the Army of Northern Virginia, never rode with the guerrillas, never would have. He finished tying down the supplies with more force than necessary. But men like Miller don't care about the truth. They need someone to blame. Lydia understood all too well. I'm sorry. Matthew's expression softened as he looked at her. It's all right, old wounds. He helped her mount Penny. Let's head back. I don't like the way Reynolds was looking at you. They were halfway home when hoofbeats sounded behind them. Matthew reined in, turning to see who followed. Lydia's stomach dropped as she recognized the well-dressed figure of George Reynolds, accompanied by Deputy Miller and another man she didn't recognize. Keep riding, Matthew said urgently. Get to the homestead. There's a rifle in the cabinet by the door. I'm not leaving you, Lydia insisted. This isn't about you. It's old business between me and Miller. Xavier, Miller called out as they approached, need a word with you and the lady. Matthew positioned Sovereign between the approaching riders and Lydia. Say what you need to say, Miller. The three men pulled up several yards away. Reynolds leaned forward in his saddle, eyes fixed on Lydia. I remember where I've seen you now, Miss Daniels. Your likeness is on a wanted poster that came through from Santa Fe last week. Murderer, they say. Lydia felt the blood drain from her face. You're mistaken, Matthew said firmly. This is my cousin, as I told you. Strange, Reynolds continued as if Matthew hadn't spoken. The poster mentioned she might be traveling with a man who killed 3 bounty hunters. Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you say, Deputy? Miller's hand moved to rest on his holstered revolver. I think you'd both better come back to town with us. On what authority? Matthew demanded. You have no evidence of any crime. I'm a deputy of the law, that's authority enough. Deputy Miller, Matthew said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, unless you have a warrant signed by a judge, you have no right to arrest either of us. The third man, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. We don't need a warrant for a suspected murderer, Xavier. Now step aside and let us take the woman. Not happening, Matthew replied, his hand dropping to his own sidearm. Lydia saw Miller's eyes narrow, saw his fingers tighten on his revolver. Without thinking, she urged Penny forward, placing herself beside Matthew. Stop. This doesn't need to end in bloodshed. Lydia, get back, Matthew warned. No, she said firmly. Looking at Miller, she continued, Deputy, whatever you think of Mr. Xavier, this situation isn't what it appears. I'm not a murderer. Save it for the judge, Miller sneered. You're coming with us. If you want her, Matthew said quietly, you'll have to go through me. The tension stretched taut between them, a breath away from violence. Lydia saw Miller's decision in his eyes a moment before his hand moved for his gun. Matthew, she cried in warning. Gunfire erupted, the sound deafening in the open country. Penny reared in panic, nearly unseating Lydia. She clung to the saddle horn, disoriented by the chaos. Through the haze of gun smoke, she saw Miller clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. The third man lay motionless on the ground. Reynolds was turning his horse, preparing to flee. Stop right there, Reynolds, Matthew commanded, his revolver aimed steady at the banker's chest. Throw down your weapon. Reynolds hesitated, then slowly dropped his gun to the ground. Miller, Matthew continued, you're injured but not badly. Ride back to town, get the doctor, and bring the sheriff out here. The real law, not your badge and grudge. You'll hang for this, Xavier, Miller spat. I don't think so. Matthew's voice was eerily calm. Especially since you drew first. Now go, before I decide you're not worth the mercy. Miller glared but obeyed, helping Reynolds mount behind him. The two men rode off toward La Junta, leaving the body of their companion behind. Matthew dismounted, checking the fallen man for signs of life. Finding none, he sighed heavily. He's dead. Shot him center mass when he pulled on me. Lydia slid from her saddle on shaking legs. What do we do now? Matthew looked at her, his expression grim. We wait for the sheriff and hope he's in a mood to listen. The wait was excruciating. Matthew covered the dead man with his coat, then built a small fire as the afternoon waned into evening. They sat side by side, the gravity of their situation hanging heavy between them. I'm sorry, Lydia said at last. This is my fault. Matthew shook his head. Miller's had it in for me since I arrived. This was coming one way or another. But Reynolds recognized me. If I hadn't come to town, then something else would have happened, Matthew interrupted gently. Lydia, you can't blame yourself for defending your life, not then in Santa Fe and not now. She looked at him, this man who had risked everything to protect her, a stranger, a fugitive. Why? She asked. Why would you put yourself in danger for me? Matthew was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and raw with honesty. Because from the moment I found you in that barn, something in me recognized something in you. Broken maybe, hunted certainly, but not beaten. He met her gaze, firelight dancing in his eyes. I think maybe I've been waiting for you without knowing it. The confession hung in the air between them, profound in its simplicity. Lydia felt tears sting her eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that what she'd been feeling wasn't one-sided. Matthew, she whispered, unable to articulate the tumult of emotions. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. Whatever happens when the sheriff arrives, I want you to know I don't regret a single moment since I found you. The sound of approaching horses interrupted the moment. Matthew stood, positioning himself protectively in front of Lydia as a group of riders came into view. Sheriff Thomas Riley was a broad-shouldered man with a salt and pepper beard and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He dismounted, surveying the scene with professional detachment, the dead man, the remains of the firefight, Matthew and Lydia standing tensely by the fire. Xavier, he greeted with a nod. Quite a mess you found yourself in. Sheriff, Matthew returned, appreciate you coming out personally. Miller's got quite a story, says you harbored a fugitive, then ambushed him when he tried to make a lawful arrest. Riley's gaze shifted to Lydia. This the woman? Yes, Matthew answered before Lydia could speak. But she's not what Miller claims, and there was no ambush. They followed us from town, tried to take her without a warrant. Miller drew first. Riley studied them both, his expression unreadable. Miss, what's your name? Your real name? Lydia straightened her shoulders. Lydia Daniels, sir. And are you wanted for murder in Santa Fe? There's a bounty on me, yes, but I'm not a murderer. With as much dignity as she could muster, Lydia explained what had happened with Harrington, the same story she'd told Matthew. When she finished, Riley was silent, thoughtfully stroking his beard. Finally, he spoke. Reynolds has been telegraphing back and forth with someone in Santa Fe for days now. Man named Harrington, judge apparently. Lydia's heart sank. His brother. Riley turned to one of his deputies. Jones, you and Peters take the body back to town. Have Doc Jensen look after Miller properly. Tell him I'll be along directly. As the men carried out his orders, Riley returned his attention to Matthew and Lydia. Xavier, your reputation in these parts is complicated. Some folks think you're trouble. Others say you're the most honest man they know. And what do you think, Sheriff? Matthew asked quietly. I think a man who treats people fair, pays his debts, and minds his own business deserves the benefit of the doubt. Riley removed his hat, running a hand through his thinning hair. As for you, Miss Daniels, your story rings true to me. Had a sister once in a similar situation. Didn't end well for her. Lydia felt a flicker of hope. What happens now, that depends, Riley said, replacing his hat. If you were in my jurisdiction, I'd be inclined to rule self-defense based on your account, but you're wanted in New Mexico territory, not Colorado. That complicates matters. She hasn't had a trial, Matthew pointed out, just a judge with a personal vendetta. True enough. Riley considered for a moment. There's a federal marshal due in La Junta next week. Good man, fair. If you're willing to give yourself up to him, Miss Daniels, tell him your story. He might be able to arrange a proper hearing. And until then, Lydia asked. Until then, I don't see any need to lock you up, but I can't have you running either. Riley fixed Matthew with a stern look. Xavier, you willing to vouch for her, ensure she stays put until the marshal arrives? Yes, Matthew answered without hesitation. All right then, Riley nodded. You two head on home. I'll handle Miller and Reynolds, and Xavier, Sheriff, try not to shoot anyone else before next week. Makes my job harder. Despite the gravity of the situation, Lydia found herself smiling at the dry humor. Thank you, Sheriff Riley. The ride back to the homestead was quiet, both of them lost in thought. The enormity of what had happened and what might still happen weighed heavily on their minds. As they unsaddled the horses in the stable, Matthew finally broke the silence. You don't have to do this, you know. Give yourself up to the marshal. Lydia paused, her hands stilling on Penny's saddle. What's the alternative? Keep running forever, we could leave, Matthew suggested. Tonight, head west to the territories or north to Wyoming, somewhere they wouldn't find us. The offer stunned her. We. You'd leave your home, for me? Matthew stepped closer, his eyes earnest in the lantern light. This place is just land and timber, Lydia. It doesn't mean anything compared to. He trailed off, searching for words. To what? She prompted softly. To how I feel when I'm with you. He reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. I know it hasn't been long, maybe I'm a fool, but I can't bear the thought of you facing a hangman's noose for defending yourself. Lydia's heart swelled with emotions she'd long thought herself incapable of feeling: hope, tenderness, and something deeper that frightened and exhilarated her in equal measure. Matthew, she said, squeezing his hand, if I run now, I'll be running forever, living in fear, looking over my shoulder. That's not living. She took a deep breath. I have to face this. I have to trust that the truth will matter to the right people. Matthew studied her face, admiration clear in his gaze. You're braver than most men I've known. I'm terrified, she admitted with a small laugh. But for the first time, I'm not alone. The week that followed was strange, a peculiar blend of dread and contentment. Each day brought them closer to the marshal's arrival, yet each day also deepened the connection between them. They worked side by side in comfortable synchronicity, shared meals and conversations, and in the evenings, Matthew taught Lydia to play chess on a set he'd carved himself. On the third night, as Matthew explained the movement of the knight, their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. Slowly, deliberately, Matthew turned his palm upward, an invitation. Lydia slid her fingers between his, marveling at how natural it felt. I've never known anyone like you, Matthew said quietly, the chess game forgotten. Nor I you, Lydia replied. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle as if she were something precious and fragile. When he leaned in, she met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long, arduous journey. The days that followed were colored by a new awareness between them, a tenderness that manifested in lingering touches and shared glances. They didn't speak of the future, couldn't, with so much uncertainty hanging over their heads, but they treasured each moment together as if it might be their last. On the morning the marshal was due to arrive, Lydia found Matthew outside, chopping wood with furious intensity. The pile beside him had grown to an unnecessary size, a physical manifestation of his anxiety. You're going to run out of trees at this rate, she called out, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. Matthew paused, breathing heavily, sweat glistening on his brow despite the cool morning air. Just keeping busy. Lydia handed him a cup. We should leave soon if we want to meet the marshal in town. He took a long drink, then set the cup aside. I've been thinking maybe we should wait, see if Riley brings him out here instead. Matthew, Lydia touched his arm. We agreed. I'm done running. It's not running, he argued. It's being cautious. Miller will be there, Reynolds too, probably. Sheriff Riley gave his word we'd be safe. Matthew ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Words don't stop bullets, Lydia. She stepped closer, placing her palms against his chest. I know you're afraid for me. I'm afraid too, but I have to do this. I have to face them, tell my story. She looked up into his troubled eyes. And I need you beside me when I do. Matthew covered her hands with his own, then brought them to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. All right, he conceded. Together. They rode into La Junta side by side, heads held high despite the stares and whispers that followed them down the main street. The sheriff's office was at the far end, a small but sturdy building with a single cell visible through the barred window. Inside, Sheriff Riley was in conversation with a tall, lean man wearing a worn duster and a U.S. Marshal's badge. Deputy Miller sat sullenly at a desk in the corner, his arm in a sling, while George Reynolds paced near the door. All eyes turned to Matthew and Lydia as they entered. Xavier. Miss Daniels, Riley nodded in greeting. This is Marshal James Cooper. The marshal stepped forward, his weathered face impassive as he studied Lydia. Miss Daniels, I've received some interesting telegrams about you from New Mexico Territory. I'm sure you have, sir, Lydia replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She's a confessed murderer, Reynolds interjected. Judge Harrington has offered a substantial reward for her return to Santa Fe to face justice. Is that so? Cooper turned his penetrating gaze on Reynolds. And your interest in this matter, Mr. Reynolds? Beyond the reward, that is. Reynolds straightened his waistcoat. As a banker and a leading citizen of La Junta, I consider it my duty to assist in upholding the law. Very civic-minded of you, Cooper remarked dryly. He gestured to 2 chairs. Miss Daniels, Mr. Xavier, please sit. I'd like to hear your version of events, both in Santa Fe and here. For the next hour, Lydia recounted her story once more, sparing no detail of Harrington's abuse or the circumstances of his death. Matthew then explained his involvement, from finding Lydia wounded in the barn to the confrontation with Miller and Reynolds on the road. Throughout their accounts, Cooper remained expressionless, occasionally making notes in a small book. Miller interrupted several times with objections, while Reynolds alternated between scoffing and attempting to discredit their testimony. Sheriff Riley maintained order with firm reminders and occasional sharp glances. When they finished, Cooper closed his notebook. Sheriff Riley, might I have a word with you in private? The 2 lawmen stepped outside, leaving an uncomfortable silence in their wake. Minutes stretched like hours until they returned. Cooper's face was still unreadable, but Riley looked satisfied. Miss Daniels, Cooper began, I've reviewed the wanted notice from Santa Fe, your statement, and the testimony of witnesses here in La Junta, including Sheriff Riley's assessment of the situation. I've also received telegrams from the Harrington household staff in response to inquiries I sent yesterday. Lydia's hands trembled in her lap. Matthew reached over, covering them with his own. 2 of the maids corroborated your account of Mr. Harrington's character and habits, Cooper continued. They were afraid to speak up until now, fearing the judge's retribution. Based on this evidence, I'm dismissing the murder charge against you. A wave of disbelief washed over Lydia. Dismissed, just like that, not just like that, Cooper corrected. I've been investigating Judge Harrington for months. There have been irregularities in his administration of justice. Your case gave me the leverage I needed with witnesses who were previously too frightened to talk. He turned to Miller and Reynolds. As for the incident on the road, Sheriff Riley and I agree that Mr. Xavier acted in self-defense, given that Deputy Miller fired first according to all accounts except his own. This is outrageous, Reynolds sputtered. She admitted killing a man. In self-defense, Cooper replied firmly. Just as the evidence shows, unless you'd like to argue that a woman should submit to assault rather than defend herself, Mr. Reynolds fell silent, though his expression remained mutinous. Deputy Miller, Cooper continued, Sheriff Riley informs me he'll be reviewing your continued employment given your conduct in this matter. I suggest you reflect carefully on your actions. Miller glared but said nothing. Miss Daniels, Cooper said, his tone softening slightly, you're free to go. The charges have been dropped and I'll be sending official notification to that effect to all territorial authorities. Lydia couldn't speak, overcome with emotion. Matthew squeezed her hands, his own relief palpable. Thank you, Marshal, he said for both of them. Sheriff, Riley nodded. Get on home, you two, enough excitement for one day. Outside, Lydia stopped in the middle of the street, looking up at the clear blue sky as if seeing it for the first time. I can't believe it, she whispered. It's over. It's really over. Matthew's arms encircled her waist from behind, drawing her against him. Told you the truth would matter to the right people. She turned in his embrace to face him. You saved my life, Matthew Xavier, in more ways than one. His eyes searched hers, filled with a tenderness that took her breath away. You saved mine too, Lydia Daniels. I was existing, not living, before you came along. What happens now? She asked softly, a slow smile spread across his face. Now we start living. He took her hand, leading her toward their horses. Come on, let's go home. Home, Lydia repeated, the word filling her with warmth. I like the sound of that. The months that followed were the happiest of Lydia's life. As spring blossomed into summer, so too did her relationship with Matthew. They worked side by side to improve the homestead, expanding the garden, repairing fences, and building new furniture for the cabin that they now shared in every sense. Word of Lydia's innocence spread through La Junta, helped along by Sheriff Riley's firm stance against any gossip to the contrary. Gradually, the townsfolk accepted her presence, then welcomed it. Her knowledge of literature and mathematics made her valuable as an occasional teacher for the town's children, while her garden produced vegetables that fetched good prices at the weekly market. Deputy Miller was dismissed from his position after an investigation revealed a pattern of abusing his authority. He left town shortly thereafter, heading east according to rumors. George Reynolds remained, though he gave both Lydia and Matthew a wide berth, his ambitions for reward money thoroughly thwarted. On a warm evening in late August, Matthew led Lydia to a hilltop overlooking the homestead. The setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and amber, casting long shadows across the land that had become her sanctuary. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Matthew said, his arm around her waist. "It is," Lydia agreed, leaning into him. "I never imagined I could be this happy." Matthew turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. His expression was solemn yet tender. "Lydia, these past months with you have been the best of my life. You've brought light and purpose to each day." Her heart quickened at the intensity in his gaze. "As have you for me." "I know we haven't spoken much of the future," he continued, "but I can't imagine mine without you in it." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. I've been carrying it, waiting for the right moment." Tears welled in Lydia's eyes as Matthew dropped to one knee before her. "Lydia Daniels, I love you more than I thought it possible to love another person. Will you marry me, be my wife, my partner, for all the days we have left?" "Yes," she whispered through her tears. "Yes, Matthew. Nothing would make me happier." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms, kissing her with a passion that spoke of promises kept and a future filled with love. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in La Junta, Sheriff Riley standing as Matthew's best man, and the schoolteacher, Miss Porter, as Lydia's maid of honor. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by townspeople who had come to respect the couple's resilience and devotion to each other. As autumn painted the countryside in rich reds and golds, Lydia and Matthew expanded their homestead, adding a room to the cabin and purchasing additional cattle from a neighboring ranch that was closing. Matthew's furniture business flourished, with orders coming from as far away as Denver, while Lydia started a small school on their property for children from outlying farms. One crisp October morning, as they shared breakfast before beginning the day's work, Lydia placed her hand over Matthew's. "I have something to tell you," she said, her eyes shining. Matthew looked up from his coffee. "What is it, love?" "In spring," Lydia said with a soft smile, "there will be 3 of us at this table." Matthew's expression transformed from confusion to wonder as her meaning registered. We're going to have a baby," she confirmed. "Dr. Jensen confirmed it yesterday when I went into town." With a joyous laugh, Matthew rose from his chair and swept Lydia into his arms, spinning her around the room. "A baby, our baby," he set her down gently, suddenly concerned. "Should I be twirling you like that? I don't want to." Lydia silenced him with a kiss. "I'm with child, not made of glass, but your concern is noted and appreciated." As winter descended on the Colorado territory, bringing with it short days and long nights, the Xavier homestead glowed with warmth and anticipation. Matthew crafted a cradle from cherry wood, carving delicate patterns along the sides. Lydia sewed tiny garments, each stitch a prayer for the child growing within her. They welcomed visitors, more often Sheriff Riley, who brought news from town, and a hand-carved rocking horse for the baby. Miss Porter, who gifted them with children's books for the years to come. Even Marshal Cooper passed through once, tipping his hat to the expectant parents and sharing a meal before continuing on his rounds. On a snowy evening in late February, as wind howled around the eaves of their snug cabin, Lydia looked up from her sewing to find Matthew watching her from his workbench, love evident in every line of his face. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about the night we met," he replied. "How frightened you were, how you whispered that they said you were dangerous." Lydia smiled at the memory. "And you said I was safe with you. I meant it then, I mean it even more now." He set aside the toy he was whittling and came to sit beside her on the settee. "You and our child will always be safe with me, Lydia, I swear it." She leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "I know, and you'll always be safe with me." Outside, the storm raged on, but within the walls of their home, peace reigned, a peace hard won through courage, truth, and the healing power of love. As the baby kicked beneath her hand, Lydia closed her eyes in gratitude for the dangerous path that had led her to this moment of perfect safety in Matthew's arms. Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers and birdsong, the land reawakening after winter's slumber. Lydia's time grew near, the swell of her belly a constant reminder of the miracle to come. Matthew hovered anxiously, never straying far from her side, much to her affectionate exasperation. "I'm perfectly capable of walking to the garden alone," she assured him one mild April morning as he insisted on accompanying her to check on the early plantings. "I know you are," he replied, offering his arm nonetheless, "but humor me." She took his arm with a mock sigh, "as if I have a choice." They were inspecting the tender shoots of peas and carrots when Lydia felt the first pain, a sharp contraction that made her gasp and clutch Matthew's sleeve. "Lydia," alarm colored his voice. "What is it?" "I think," she said, breathing carefully as the pain subsided, "our child is eager to meet us." What followed was a flurry of activity. Matthew helped Lydia back to the cabin, then rode like a man possessed to fetch Dr. Jensen from town. By the time they returned, Lydia's labor was well established, the pains coming regularly and with increasing intensity. "First babies often take their time, Mrs. Xavier," Dr. Jensen said reassuringly as he examined her. "You've got a while yet before this little one makes an appearance." The doctor's prediction proved accurate. Through the afternoon and into the evening, Lydia labored, walking when she could, resting when she couldn't. Matthew remained by her side, wiping her brow, holding her hands through contractions, murmuring words of encouragement and love. As midnight approached, Dr. Jensen announced it was time. Matthew made to leave the room, as was customary for fathers during the birth itself, but Lydia gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Stay," she insisted through gritted teeth. "Please." Dr. Jensen raised an eyebrow but nodded. "If that's what you want, Mrs. Xavier." "It is," Matthew confirmed, his eyes never leaving Lydia's face, and so he stayed, supporting her as she brought their child into the world with courage and determination that only deepened his admiration for her. At 1:30 in the morning, their daughter was born, a robust, healthy girl with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. "She's perfect," Matthew whispered in awe as Dr. Jensen placed the swaddled infant in Lydia's arms. "Just like her mother." Tears of joy streamed down Lydia's face as she gazed at their daughter. "Hello, little one, we've been waiting for you." They named her Hope, Elizabeth Xavier Hope, for the future they'd built together against all odds. Elizabeth for Matthew's mother, who had worn the ring that now graced Lydia's finger. As dawn broke, Dr. Jensen took his leave, promising to return in a few days to check on mother and child. Matthew and Lydia sat together on their bed, marveling at the tiny life they'd created. "I never thought I could feel this way," Matthew said, his finger caught in his daughter's surprisingly strong grip. "It's as if my heart exists outside my body now." "I know exactly what you mean," Lydia replied, leaning against him. "She's the best of both of us." "And the best is yet to come," Matthew added, pressing a kiss to Lydia's temple. "Our story is just beginning." The years that followed proved him right. Hope grew into a spirited, intelligent child with her father's quick smile and her mother's determined nature. She was joined 2 years later by a brother, Thomas James Xavier, a thoughtful boy who preferred books to his sister's more adventurous pursuits. The homestead prospered, expanding to include additional acreage and a proper schoolhouse where Lydia taught not only her own children but those from neighboring farms. Matthew's furniture gained renown throughout Colorado, his pieces prized for their craftsmanship and artistry. They added onto the cabin, transforming it into a comfortable home that often buzzed with visitors and laughter. There were challenges, of course, harsh winters, drought seasons, the occasional encounter with those who remembered old stories and whispered behind their backs. But through it all, Lydia and Matthew faced each obstacle together, their bond only strengthening with time. On the 10th anniversary of the night they met, Matthew surprised Lydia with a gift, a small wooden box, intricately carved with wildflowers and vines. "What's this?" she asked, running her fingers over the delicate work. "Open it," he urged. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a silver locket. When Lydia opened it, she found miniature portraits of Hope and Thomas on one side and on the other an inscription, "You are safe with me always." Tears filled her eyes as Matthew fastened the locket around her neck. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." Later that night, after the children were asleep, they sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the vast Colorado sky. Lydia's head rested on Matthew's shoulder, his arm around her waist, the comfortable silence of long married lovers enveloping them. "Do you ever think about how differently our lives might have turned out?" Lydia asked. "If you hadn't found me that night," Matthew considered the question. "Sometimes. But then I look at our children, our home, the life we've built, and I know that this was always where we were meant to end up." He turned to face her, the love in his eyes as strong as it had been on the day they wed. "Every choice, every struggle, every joy has led us here. And I wouldn't change a single moment of it." Lydia cupped his face in her hands, the silver locket gleaming in the moonlight against her throat. "Nor would I. Even the darkest moments were worth it because they brought me to you." Their lips met in a kiss that spoke of a love tested by time and trial, yet only made stronger by the journey. Above them, a shooting star blazed across the night sky, a fleeting reminder of the precious nature of life and love, and the rare gift of finding safe harbor in another's heart. In the years that followed, La Junta grew from a small frontier town into a thriving community. The railroad came, bringing new opportunities and faces, but the Xavier homestead remained a constant, a place of warmth and welcome known throughout the county for its beauty and the family that had built it from humble beginnings. Hope, with her mother's intelligence and her father's steady hands, grew into a talented artist whose landscapes captured the wild beauty of the Colorado territory. Thomas, quieter but no less determined, developed a passion for law and justice, inspired by the stories of his parents' past and the occasional visits from Marshall Cooper, who had become something of an honorary uncle to the Xavier children. As their 20th anniversary approached, Lydia and Matthew began planning a celebration to mark not only their years together, but the community they had helped to build. The schoolhouse Lydia had established now served dozens of children, while Matthew's furniture workshop had expanded to employ 3 apprentices, teaching the next generation the craftsmanship he had perfected. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the day Matthew had proposed, he found Lydia standing on the hilltop overlooking their property, her silver-streaked hair catching the sunlight. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, coming to stand beside her. She smiled, taking his hand. Time had etched lines at the corners of her eyes and mouth, but to Matthew, she was as beautiful as the day he'd found her, perhaps more so, for the years had only added depth and character to her beauty. "I was thinking about that frightened young woman in the barn," she replied. "How far she's come, how much she's learned about strength and love and building a life worth living." Matthew squeezed her hand. "She was always strong, she just needed to be reminded of it." Lydia leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence as she had countless times over the years. "We've been blessed, haven't we, despite everything, or perhaps because of it?" "We have," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "More than I ever dreamed possible." As they stood there, surveying the life they had created together, a rider appeared on the road leading to their home. Even at a distance, the familiar figure of Sheriff Riley, now gray-haired but still straight-backed in the saddle, was recognizable. "We should go down," Lydia said. "See what brings Thomas to visit on a weekday." Thomas Riley, named for the sheriff who had shown them kindness when it mattered most, had followed in his namesake's footsteps, serving as La Junta's deputy for the past 3 years. His visits were always welcome but seldom unplanned. They met him at the gate, concern evident in their expressions. "Everything all right, son?" Matthew asked as Thomas dismounted. "Everything's fine, Pa," he assured them with a smile. "Just bringing news. The town council met yesterday. They've decided to name the new bridge over the Arkansas River." "Oh," Lydia's curiosity was piqued. "What have they chosen?" Thomas's grin widened. "The Xavier Bridge, in honor of the family that's done more to build this community than any other." Lydia's hand flew to her mouth in surprise while Matthew stood speechless beside her. "There's to be a ceremony next month," Thomas continued, clearly enjoying their reaction. "Mayor wants you both to speak. Hope's already designing the commemorative plaque." "I don't know what to say," Matthew finally managed. "Say yes," Thomas advised. "It's quite an honor and well-deserved according to everyone in town." Later, as they shared the news with Hope over dinner, Lydia felt a profound sense of completion. From the desperate woman who had whispered, "They said I'm dangerous," to a respected community leader whose name would grace a bridge connecting people and places, her journey had come full circle. "You know what this means," Hope said mischievously over dessert. "You'll have to finally write down your story. People will want to know how the bridge got its name." "Our story isn't over yet," Matthew countered, winking at Lydia. "Still plenty of chapters to be written." "Maybe so," Hope conceded, "but the beginning is worth telling. How you found Mother in that barn, how you protected each other. It's like something from a novel." Lydia exchanged a look with Matthew, a lifetime of shared experiences passing between them in a single glance. "Perhaps someday," she said, "but for now we're too busy living it to write it down." As the evening wound down and their children departed, Hope to her own small house at the edge of their property, Thomas back to town, Matthew and Lydia stood on their porch, arms around each other, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar splendor. "Bridge builders," Matthew mused. "Who would have thought? You built this life for us," Lydia said softly. "Plank by plank, day by day, a bridge from what was to what could be." "We built it together," he corrected, turning to face her, "and it's the finest work I've ever done." In the fading light, their lips met in a kiss that held the wisdom of years and the tenderness of abiding love, a testament to the night when a frightened woman had whispered of danger, and a brave man had offered safety that became so much more than shelter from a storm. It became home.